My alpha didn't roar when the cartel boss demanded me as payment. He didn't flip the mahogany desk, and he didn't rip the man's throat out. Instead, Roman uncapped his gold pen. "She's in the elevator," he said. His voice was like crushed ice. With a single stroke of ink, the billionaire syndicate boss traded my life for a maritime shipping route. I stood frozen behind the glass doors, clutching a cracked burner phone to my chest. Encrypted inside it were the GPS coordinates to his missing sister, the exact coordinates I had bled to find for him. He thought I was just a ghost in the pack hierarchy, a submissive Omega who would go quietly as collateral. But as the cartel enforcers lunged for me, the illusion of our romance died. I lifted the phone high in the air. I looked my alpha dead in his golden eyes, watched his cold mask shatter into pure panic. "Contract canceled," I whispered, and I smashed his only leverage into 1,000 pieces. Chapter 1. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that their betrayal physically stops your heart? Quinn stood inside the private glass elevator. Her hands shook just a fraction as she clutched a cheap plastic burner phone to her chest. It wasn't a shield, though she held it like one. It was a lifeline. Encrypted inside its cracked casing were the GPS coordinates of the boss's missing sister, Roman's sister. After spending weeks digging through the darkest, most violent corners of the underground to secure this data, she truly believed tonight was the night. The night the Apex Syndicate boss would finally see her. As the elevator climbed higher into the stormy city skyline, her pulse hammered against her throat. She was just an unrecognized Omega, a ghost in the pack hierarchy. Yet, she had done the impossible. She had found his blood. For that, she foolishly expected a reward. Not money, not a seat at his table. She just wanted his heart. The elevator smelled of sterile steel and ozone. But beneath that lingered his scent. Roman, dark pine, expensive leather, and a heavy alpha resonance that always made her latent Omega instincts hum with blind obedience. The glass box jolted slightly, settling at floor 99. The penthouse. Her breath caught. She smoothed down her simple black dress, worn exclusively for him. She wanted him to look at her differently when she handed over the phone. She wanted to hear his deep voice whisper her name with affection instead of cold authority. Would he finally pull her into his arms when he realized she had risked everything for his family? A digital chime broke the silence. The display flashed green. She didn't know what terrified her more. The cartel enforcers she had dodged in the slums, or the overwhelming gravity of the man waiting on the other side of these doors. She stepped forward. The air thickened. It was heavy with the smell of rain blowing in from the open balcony. But a sharper, uglier scent cut through the ozone. It wasn't just Roman waiting for her. Strange, violent scents, stale blood, and rotting earth hit the back of her throat. Before her mind could process the danger, her body reacted. A freezing shiver crawled up her spine. Her inner wolf pressed forward, whining in sudden distress. Why were strange alphas in his private sanctuary? Her grip tightened on the phone, the plastic edges digging into her palm. She needed to give him the coordinates immediately so his lethal enforcers could mobilize. The doors slid fully open, and the illusion of her beautiful romance shattered into a million jagged pieces. The massive penthouse was entirely dark, except for the violent flashes of lightning illuminating the floor-to-ceiling windows. Roman sat behind his mahogany desk. He looked like a god forged from shadows. His tailored suit contoured perfectly to his broad shoulders. His jaw clenched tight. But he wasn't looking at the door. He wasn't looking for her. 3 massive, scarred men stood opposite his desk. Heavy leather jackets covered the jagged fang tattoos of the Vargas Cartel, the most bloodthirsty syndicate in the underground. Quinn froze. Roman slid a thick paper contract across the polished wood. A gold pen rested between his fingers. "The Eastern Maritime shipping route is yours," Roman said. His voice was crushed ice. It carried no warmth, no hesitation. And in exchange, the blood debt is settled. The largest Vargas enforcer, a towering man with a missing eye, sneered. And the collateral? The old laws demand a life for a life, Roman. We want a breeder. We want the Omega. Quinn's blood ran cold. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She waited for Roman's wolf to roar. She waited for him to flip the heavy desk and rip the Vargas Alpha's throat out for daring to speak about her that way. She expected a protector, a mate. Instead, Roman uncapped his pen. "She is in the elevator," he stated flatly. He didn't look up. He didn't even glance toward the glowing green doors. He signed the paper. With a single stroke of ink, her entire world collapsed. He had signed her away. She was nothing but leverage. A pawn traded for a shipping route to move his illegal weapons. A hollow, agonizing scream echoed inside her head. Her wolf whimpered, curling up in the darkest corner of her soul. The pain was so absolute she felt physically gutted. The Vargas boss laughed a wet, ugly sound. He turned slowly. His single eye locked onto Quinn. "Pretty little thing," the cartel boss growled, taking a heavy step toward her. "You'll fetch a high price at the auction after I'm done with you." She looked to the desk one last time, begging silently. "Look at me. Please, look at me." Roman just stared at the signed contract. His face was a mask of impenetrable stone. A man who measured life in leverage could never value a heart freely given. In that roaring silence, her profound sadness evaporated. The fragile, submissive Omega died in that exact second, and from her ashes, a survivor woke up. Pure anger exploded inside her chest, burning away the tears and the terror. The Vargas enforcers lunged, a blur of unnatural shifter speed. But Quinn held the ultimate leverage. She looked down at the cheap burner phone, the only copy of the coordinates, the only way Roman could ever find the sister he desperately loved. Quinn lifted the phone high in the air. Roman's head snapped up. His golden alpha eyes flared with sudden realization. He recognized the device instantly. "Quinn!" His voice cracked. The cold authority vanished, replaced by raw panic. "Don't!" She smiled. It was a broken, dangerous thing. "Contract canceled," she whispered. With every ounce of her strength, she threw the phone onto the marble floor, raised her heavy boot, and stomped down. Crunch. The plastic shattered. The fragile microchip inside snapped in half, destroying the encrypted data permanently. "No!" Roman roared. A deafening alpha scream of absolute agony that rattled the window panes. She didn't stick around to watch him bleed. Spinning on her heel, she ignored the elevator. They would just cut the power. She dove through the heavy fire door into the emergency stairwell. Behind her, the penthouse erupted into pure chaos. Wood smashed. Men shouted. The terrifying sounds of a violent wolf fight echoed down the concrete shaft. She blocked it all out, leaping down the stairs 3 at a time. Her breath burned in her lungs. By morning, she would be hunted by the Vargas cartel, and Roman's men alike. She was completely alone. But as she burst out of the ground floor exit into the rain-slicked alleyway, a strange clarity washed over her. There was no magical scent cure waiting to fix her broken heart. There was only the dark, wet concrete of the city. She sucked in a harsh breath of the smog-filled air and vanished into the shadows of the underground. If Roman wanted his sister back, he was going to have to bleed for it. Have you ever heard a monster realize it just lost its most valuable prize? Rough brick bit into her spine. Quinn pressed herself deeper into the shadows of the alley, letting the freezing rain wash over her. It soaked through her ruined dress, turning the fabric into a heavy, icy second skin. High above her, 99 floors up in the storm. A terrifying sound ripped through the thunder. It was a roar. It wasn't a human scream. It was the primal, earth-shattering howl of a dominant alpha losing his mind. Glass rained down onto the street below, shattering like thousands of tiny diamonds on the wet asphalt. Roman was tearing his own penthouse apart. Her lungs burned like swallowed glass. She finally forced herself to stop running and crouched behind a rusted dumpster. As silence stretched between the thunderclaps, her mind began to race. She had lost the alpha she thought she loved. She had lost her sister all over again. She had lost her innocence. Years ago, her sister had tried to warn her about this world. "The city doesn't care if you love Quinn," she had whispered late one night, patching up a stray pup. "The city only cares if you have teeth." She hadn't understood it then. She understood it perfectly now. With every heartbeat, her Omega instinct screamed at her to go back. Her wolf whined, begging to return to the safety of her alpha's commanding scent. But she crushed that instinct. She locked it away in a dark box inside her mind. Love was merely a transaction to men like Roman. Leverage was the only true currency of the underground. But a lingering question nagged at her. When she hacked Roman's servers to find her sister's coordinates, she downloaded a second, heavily encrypted file, a Black Ops ledger. She didn't know what was inside it yet. But why had Roman hidden it under his own personal blood seal? Before she could move, the distant wail of Vargas Cartel sirens echoed through the lower wards. The hunt had officially begun. They were coming for her. She needed to mask her scent, find cover, and become a ghost before the hounds caught her trail. Eventually, she stumbled into an abandoned laundromat a few blocks east. A flickering pink bulb buzzed overhead like an angry hornet. The air smelled of mold, stale detergent, and the sharp tang of copper. Her feet were bleeding, leaving wet, dark footprints on the linoleum. Without thinking, she kicked the ruined heels away. She was done playing dress-up for a man who traded lives. From there, she scavenged. She found an oversized mechanic's jacket left on a rusted table. She wrapped it around her shivering shoulders. It smelled like motor oil and cheap tobacco, but it was warm. It was survival. She had to be ruthless now. The Vargas cartel would use shifter hounds to track her scent. She grabbed a half-empty bottle of industrial bleach from a janitor's cart. Her hands trembled just a fraction. She poured a splash of the toxic liquid onto a rag and wiped it directly across her neck, right over her scent glands. The pain was a living thing. It bit into her skin like liquid fire. She bit her lip so hard she tasted her own blood, violently suppressing a scream. She didn't cry. Instead, she stared at her reflection in the cracked window pane. Her dark hair was plastered to her skull. Her eyes were hollow and hard. She wasn't running for safety anymore. She was running for blood. She was no longer a submissive Omega. She had to start acting like an apex predator. How do you kill a king who owns the entire board? You don't play his game. You flip the table. She needed an army. She needed a lethal shield. In this brutal city, there was only one pack crazy enough to go to war against Roman and the Vargas cartel simultaneously. The Petrov Syndicate. The wind shifted outside, carrying the faint howl of a tracking wolf. She pulled the heavy jacket tighter. She stepped back into the storm, walking straight into the devil's den. By the time she reached the rusted iron doors of the Crimson Claw, her body was completely numb. This was a Petrov dive bar. It was enemy territory. It was a guaranteed death sentence for a stray Omega. She pushed the heavy wood open. The stench hit her like a physical blow. Stale beer, wet fur, and the overwhelming aggressive musk of unmatched alphas. The loud grunge music cut off. Dozens of glowing eyes turned to stare at her. The tension in the room thickened into concrete. She walked past the drunkards. She walked past the thieves. She walked straight to the massive bartender wiping down the sticky counter. "You're a long way from home, little dog," the bartender rumbled. His voice sounded like grinding stones. He leaned forward, exposing a jagged scar slashed across his throat. Quinn stared at it. Why did that scar look exactly like the signature bladework of Roman's elite guard? An Omega in Petrov territory was supposed to cower. She forced her chin up. She locked eyes with him. "I'm not here for a drink," she said. Her voice was steady, ice cold. "I want to see the boss." A few of the alphas laughed. It was a cruel, hungry sound. "The boss doesn't see strays," a voice sneered from behind her. A heavy hand grabbed her shoulder. The grip was bruising, designed to force her to her knees. Quinn didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. She held the keys to Roman's empire in her head, which made her the most dangerous thing in this room. "Tell him," Quinn said smoothly, ignoring the hand crushing her collarbone, "that I have the master override codes to Roman's Eastern Port security network, the ones he just sold to Vargas." The laughter died. The silence that followed was suffocating. The bartender's golden eyes widened. He stared at her, assessing the lie. But shifter senses don't lie. Her heart rate was flat. She was telling the truth. Between them, something cracked. The absolute certainty of the pack hierarchy shattered. "Let her go," the bartender ordered the man behind her. He picked up a black rotary phone hidden beneath the bar. He didn't take his eyes off her for a single second. "Boss?" the bartender murmured into the receiver. "You're gonna want to come downstairs. We have a ghost in the house." "And she's holding a match." Quinn let out a slow breath. She had made her play. There was no turning back now. The walk up the narrow wooden stairs felt like a march to the gallows. Quinn felt the heavy gaze of the scarred bartender burning into her spine with every step. Below them, the abrasive grunge music faded. It turned into a dull, rhythmic thumping against her bare, bleeding feet. They reached a thick steel door at the end of the dark hallway. She forced her shoulders back. A cornered animal is the most dangerous thing in the woods. The bartender pushed the door open. The smell of stale cigar smoke and cheap velvet hit her. She stepped inside. Viktor Petrov didn't look like a vicious syndicate boss. He looked like a tired accountant. He wore a sharp gray suit. He sat behind a massive desk, casually reading a thick, leather-bound book. He didn't even look up when she entered. The heavy steel door locked behind her with a final, echoing click. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until Viktor finally closed his book. His icy blue eyes locked onto hers. "You have a lot of nerve walking into my territory, little wolf," Viktor murmured. His voice was soft, but it carried a lethal edge. She knew exactly how far she had fallen. She might be a corpse in an alley by morning, but then she remembered the secondary file she had downloaded from Roman's server, the encrypted folder labeled Project Chimera. She didn't know what the file contained, but it was a secret Roman guarded with his life. That gave her power. Instead of trembling, Quinn walked directly up to Victor's desk and planted her hands on the polished wood. "I have the master override codes to Roman's Eastern Port," she stated. Her voice was terrifyingly steady. "I can cripple his shipping routes in 10 seconds. Viktor leaned back in his leather chair. He steepled his fingers. He was calculating her worth, weighing her life against the inevitable war. "The Vargas cartel is hunting me," she continued, dropping her voice into a raspy whisper. "You are going to protect me. You get Roman's empire, and I get a shield." Despite the chemical burns on her neck, a tiny trace of her omega scent hit the air. Victor's nostrils flared. Negotiating with a starving wolf was suicide, but she had no other options. A slow, cold smile crept across Victor's face. He slid a black laptop across the desk. "Prove it," he challenged softly. "Give me one code." Quinn stared at the keyboard. She remembered the brutal story of the last Omega who tried to bargain with a cartel, dragged back by her hair and displayed as a bloody warning. She refused to end up like her. She reached out, rested her trembling fingers on the keys. She was playing a very deadly game. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, driven by pure survival instinct. She typed the first sequence. Her eyes locked on the screen. The laptop flashed green. Access granted. Victor's icy blue eyes widened. A flicker of genuine shock broke his composed facade. In a matter of seconds, she had just handed over millions of dollars of Roman's illegal cargo. The shift in power was instantaneous and undeniable. Viktor reached out and snapped the laptop shut. He stood up, walked to a crystal decanter on a side table, and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He slid one across the desk toward her. His expression hardened. "You just bought yourself a room, ghost," Victor said. "But if you try to run, I will kill you myself." Quinn didn't beg. She didn't cry. She didn't surrender. She simply picked up the glass and tossed the burning liquid down her throat. Her survival depended completely on her usefulness. She had to keep the rest of the codes locked safely inside her head until she had a guaranteed exit. Victor signaled for his guards. They escorted her down another hidden, windowless hallway. She was ushered into a damp, concrete safehouse room. The heavy metal door slammed shut. The deadbolt slid into place with terrifying finality. Alone in the dark, she slowly slid down the cold wall until she hit the floor. The adrenaline finally crashed, leaving her hollow and aching. Her wolf stirred painfully in her chest. Unwanted memories flooded her mind. The way Roman used to gently trace the delicate veins on her wrist. The way his deep, rumbling voice used to whisper her name in the dark. It had all been a false intimacy. A beautiful lie that perfectly disguised his predatory nature. To survive, she had to weaponize that pain. She had to stay angry. She glanced around the miserable room. She spotted a rusty iron cot in the corner. Exhaustion pressed down on her like a physical weight. She curled into a tight ball on the thin mattress, shivering in her damp clothes. As sleep threatened to pull her under, a disturbing detail gnawed at her sanity. Back in the penthouse, when the Vargas boss had stepped toward her, why did that monster smell faintly of her missing sister's unique lavender perfume? It was an open loop that made her stomach twist in dread. She swore she would burn Roman's world to the ground for what he did to her. The mark on her neck throbbed with a dull ache as she closed her tired eyes. The war had officially begun. A massive explosion rocked the concrete floor. It jolted Quinn awake. The world shifted from dead silence to absolute, screaming chaos. She scrambled off the rusty cot. Her heart hammered against her ribs as heavy gunfire erupted down the hallway. The terrifying sounds of snarling wolves, shattering bones, and tearing metal echoed through the thick walls. Then, the scent hit her. It slipped beneath the crack of the metal door and paralyzed her. Pine, expensive leather, thick, coppery blood. Roman. She backed away until her spine hit the far wall. The air in the tiny room thickened, suffocating her with the sheer power of his approach. Outside her door, the violent roaring abruptly ceased. The heavy steel handle began to twist and groan under immense pressure. He wasn't picking the lock. He was destroying the barrier entirely. Crash. The heavy steel door ripped off its iron hinges. It flew across the room and slammed into the far wall. Dust and concrete debris choked the air. Roman stood in the jagged doorway, chest heaving. He was covered in Petrov blood. His tailored suit was torn to shreds. His knuckles were split and raw. His golden eyes glowed with an unnatural, feral light in the dim hallway. He had violated a decade-old peace treaty, slaughtering his way through an enemy stronghold just to find her. A treacherous, agonizing heat pooled in her stomach. Despite his horrific betrayal, her latent Omega wolf still recognized him as her mate, whining in desperate need. Roman took a slow, heavy step into the room. He wasn't looking at her like a piece of leverage anymore. He was staring at her like a starving man who had finally found water. A low, guttural growl vibrated from deep within his chest. It rattled the remaining concrete dust from the ceiling. Her bones remembered him, but her mind rejected him. Quinn forced her shaking hands to move. She dropped to her knees, grabbed a jagged, rusted piece of metal from the broken door hinge. She stood up, raised her chin, and leveled the sharp weapon directly at his chest. "Take one more step," Quinn whispered, her voice laced with pure venom. "And I will bleed you." Her wolf pressed forward, terrified but furious. She was no longer his collateral. She was his reckoning. Roman pressed his throat against the rusted metal. A single drop of dark blood welled from the cut. It slid down his ruined collar. His golden eyes remained locked on hers, unblinking. Then, the air shifted. A suffocating wave of alpha pheromones crashed into the tiny room. It was a chemical command, a biological weapon meant to force a frantic Omega into immediate submission. Dark pine and petrichor wrapped tightly around her mind, attempting to drown her rage in instinctual compliance. Her knees buckled. Her inner wolf whined, desperate to bare her throat to her mate. But the image of his gold pen gliding across the cartel contract flared behind her eyes. Quinn bit her lip until copper flooded her tongue. She fought the manipulation with sheer human grit. She pushed the rusted steel a millimeter deeper into his neck. "Stop," she hissed. "Do not try to drug me into obedience. You don't own me." Roman froze. The feral glow in his eyes fractured into profound despair. The wave of pheromones abruptly vanished, leaving the damp air cold and empty. He realized his biological authority was useless here. Pheromones could not cure betrayal. He raised his hands in absolute surrender. Before he could speak, an explosion rocked the foundation above them. The concrete ceiling cracked, raining gray dust. Heavy boot steps echoed down the hallway, followed by the metallic racking of assault rifles. Vargas enforcers. "They aren't here to negotiate," Roman growled. The apex predator returned to his posture. He didn't order her to follow. He simply looked at her, his expression tight with frantic urgency. "Quinn, please!" She dropped the metal. She didn't trust him, but she knew what the Vargas cartel did to strays. They moved like ghosts through the crumbling safe house. Roman kicked open a rusted grating hidden behind stacked crates. It revealed a vertical maintenance shaft. Quinn climbed down the iron ladder. The freezing metal bit into her bare feet. Roman followed. He pulled the heavy grate shut just as bullets shredded the room above. They descended into absolute darkness. The air grew stale, thick with ancient rust and decaying concrete. The city's abandoned subway tunnels. A flashlight beam cut through the grating high above. "Down there!" A voice echoed down the shaft. Gunfire erupted. Concrete chips exploded off the walls like shrapnel. Roman lunged. He wrapped his massive body entirely over hers, shielding her from the ricochets. A wet, heavy impact echoed in the narrow space. Roman let out a sharp grunt. His grip failed on the rusted iron rung. They fell the last 10 feet, crashing into the gravel of the subway tracks. Quinn rolled, her elbows scraping rough stone. Roman hit the ground heavily and didn't rise. She scrambled to her knees in the pitch-black tunnel. Her hands blindly searched the dark until her fingers brushed his torn suit jacket. It was slick and warm. He had taken a bullet meant for her. "Roman," she whispered, panic slicing through the anger. "Keep moving," he coughed. The sound was wet and ragged. He tried to push himself up, his arms trembling under his own weight. The untouchable billionaire was gone, replaced by a bleeding man shivering in the dirt. He collapsed back onto the gravel. The absolute ruler of the eastern seaboard was dying, looking at her not as a subordinate, but as his only lifeline. Quinn grabbed the lapels of his ruined suit. She dragged his dead weight toward a rusted maintenance alcove, hiding them in the deep shadows. The flickering glow of a single emergency bulb cast long, skeletal shadows against the tunnel walls. Quinn ripped the sleeves off her jacket. Her hands moved frantically, pressing the thick fabric against the gunshot wound in Roman's side. He hissed, his head falling back against the damp wall. "Why did you sign it?" she demanded. Her voice was a harsh whisper. She tied the makeshift bandage punishingly tight, forcing him to stay awake. "If you were just going to tear your own empire apart to get me back, why sell me in the first place?" Roman let out a ragged breath. His eyes glazed with pain. "Because I am arrogant," he rasped, his voice stripped of all smooth command. "I thought I could outmaneuver them. I thought I could sign the paper, secure the route. and intercept the Vargas convoy before you were ever handed over. A supreme, fatal miscalculation. Quinn stopped moving. The horrifying reality sank in. He had treated her life like a chess piece, assuming he was smart enough to control the board. You measured my life in leverage, she whispered. And I lost everything, he replied. His voice broke. He reached out with a trembling hand, but stopped inches from her face, refusing to touch her without permission. My logic is empty, Quinn. I built an empire of glass, and the second I saw you standing in that elevator, it shattered. Silence stretched between them, heavy with shared trauma. Stripped of his wealth and power, he was finally bleeding enough to prove he had a heart. A sudden burst of static broke the quiet. Roman slowly pulled a stolen Vargas two-way radio from his belt. The device crackled. The voice of the Vargas boss filled the damp alcove. "Lock down the city," the one-eyed Alpha ordered. His voice dripped with malice. "Find the Omega. Project Chimera requires her bone marrow. If we don't extract her alive, we can't synthesize the serum that kept her sister breathing." Quinn went entirely numb. Her sister wasn't just a captive. She was a lab rat, and Roman's encrypted files were the blueprint. The static from the radio hissed in the dark, sharp and venomous. Quinn stared at the black plastic device in Roman's bloody hand. Project Chimera. The words echoed in her skull, twisting into a horrifying reality. Her sister wasn't just missing. She was being harvested. A cold, lethal calm washed over her. The frantic, terrified Omega she had been an hour ago felt entirely hollowed out, replaced by something made of iron. "You knew," Quinn stated. Her voice was devoid of emotion, making it far more terrifying than a scream. "You knew Vargas was draining her to make a serum." Roman leaned heavily against the damp concrete wall. The shadows deepened the sharp, exhausted lines of his face. "I didn't know the full extent," he said. "I swear to you, Quinn. I acquired the Chimera files encrypted. Vargas needed my eastern port to transport the lab equipment, and he used your sister as leverage to force the trade." "Give me the laptop," she ordered. She didn't wait for permission. She reached into his torn inner jacket pocket and pulled out his satellite tablet. The screen glowed to life, illuminating the grime and blood smeared across her knuckles. "If Vargas wants the Chimera files to keep his lab running, we take the files away," Quinn said. Her fingers flew across the glass screen. She hit a biometric firewall. A flashing red thumbprint icon blocked her path. She shoved the screen toward Roman's face. He didn't try to negotiate or stall. He pressed his bloody thumb against the scanner. The firewall dissolved. "Wipe it," Roman breathed. His eyes slid shut as another wave of pain hit him. "Wipe the servers. Burn the Eastern shipping logistics. Destroy the accounts." Quinn paused. Her finger hovered over the execute command. Hitting this button meant billions of dollars of illicit cargo would vanish. Roman's empire, built over a decade of calculated ruthlessness, would cease to exist. She looked at him. A billionaire syndicate boss, bleeding on subway gravel, actively demanding the destruction of his own legacy. "Do it," he rasped, forcing his golden eyes open to meet hers. "Let my empire burn." She pressed the glass. A soft ping echoed in the subway tunnel. It was the sound of absolute destruction. Data wiped. Roots exposed. Accounts drained. Quinn watched the progress bar hit 100% before the screen went black. In a single breath, Roman went from the most feared predator in the underground to a man with nothing but the bloody clothes on his back. He hadn't done it out of biological instinct. Pheromones couldn't bypass encrypted firewalls. This was a conscious, agonizing human sacrifice. Before the weight of that action could settle, the stolen Vargas radio crackled violently. "Roman is compromised!" a new voice shouted over the frequency. Quinn recognized the harsh bark. It was Silas, Roman's trusted second-in-command. "He just crashed the entire network!" Silas yelled. His voice was laced with pure fury. "He sold us out for a stray Omega. The pact is officially broken. I want a bounty on his head. 5 million to whoever drags his carcass to my feet." The radio went dead. Roman's own pack had turned. By crippling Vargas, he had simultaneously destroyed the wealth of his lieutenants. He was officially hunted by every single criminal in the city. Roman let out a ragged, wet cough. He leaned his head back against the concrete in grim silence. Despite the terror clawing at her throat, a fractured sliver of respect took root in Quinn's chest. He had completely isolated himself from the world, cutting every tie to his power, just to become her shield. "Can you walk?" she asked. She grabbed the lapels of his suit to pull him forward. "For you?" he murmured, gritting his teeth as he forced his massive frame upright. "I can run." They limped deeper into the subterranean maze. The tunnels grew colder, the air thick with the smell of sewage and rotting timber. Above them, the muffled sounds of sirens and howling wolves bled through the street grates. The entire city was tearing itself apart looking for them. Every step Roman took was a battle. His breathing was jagged, his heavy arm draped across her shoulders for support. She bore his weight, her bare feet numb against the jagged gravel. Harsh flashlight beams cut through the dark tunnel ahead. "Check the maintenance shafts," a voice barked. The distinct scent of Silas's enforcers wafted down the corridor. They were trapped. Vargas men behind them, mutinous pack members ahead. Quinn pulled Roman behind a thick concrete pillar. There was no way out, no hidden grates, no side tunnels. Roman reached into his pocket with a trembling hand. He pulled out a silver master key drive. "Take it," he ordered. He pressed the cold metal into her palm and closed her fingers over it. "It holds my personal offshore emergency funds. Enough to buy an army. Enough to buy your sister's freedom." "No," Quinn whispered. Her chest tightened with panic. She tried to shove it back, but his grip was iron. "Listen to me," Roman interrupted. His tone left no room for argument. He stepped away from the pillar, intentionally moving toward the edge of the flashlight beams. "I traded your heart, Quinn. Let my blood buy it back." He let out a deafening, earth-shaking roar, drawing every beam of light in the tunnel directly to him. "He's here!" an enforcer screamed. Roman shoved Quinn hard into the deep shadows of an abandoned utility closet. He slammed the rusted door shut and locked her inside the dark. Just as the gunfire erupted, the rusted metal door rattled violently against its frame. Deafening bursts of assault rifle fire echoed through the pitch-black closet, vibrating right through Quinn's teeth. She pressed her hands over her ears, her chest heaving as the sounds of absolute slaughter tore through the subway corridor outside. Snarls, snapping bones, the sickening thud of bodies hitting the gravel. Then, something immense crashed directly into her door. The decades-old iron latch shrieked. It bowed inward before snapping off its hinges. The thick metal swung open, spilling the harsh light of dropped flashlights across her bare, bleeding feet. Silence descended on the tunnel, a thick, ringing silence that smelled of cordite and copper. Quinn crept out. The mutinous enforcers lay dead, their throats torn open in a display of brutal, primal violence. In the center of the carnage lay Roman. He was entirely motionless. "No," Quinn breathed. She scrambled over the jagged gravel. She dropped to her knees beside him. His chest barely rose, bleeding from a dozen new wounds. His shredded suit was soaked through. The Apex boss had become an executioner one last time, just to keep them away from her door. She grabbed his shoulders, her muscles screaming in agony. She couldn't leave him exposed in the open tunnel. Vargas reinforcements would be here in minutes. To her right, a thick steel blast door sat slightly ajar, the entrance to the sub-basements of the corporate high-rises above. She dug her heels into the dirt and pulled. It felt like moving a mountain. His dead weight burned every nerve in her arms, but she dragged him backward, inch by agonizing inch, hauling him over the threshold into a dilapidated boiler room. She kicked the metal door shut, plunging them into the dim, amber light of the emergency generators. Quinn tore off the remaining fabric of her ruined dress. She pressed the wadded cloth against the deepest wound on his chest, leaning all her weight onto her palms to apply pressure. Her sister had taught her triage, but her sister had never taught her how to stitch together a dying king in the dark. His blood coated her skin, warm and terrifyingly slick. Roman's eyelashes fluttered. A sharp, ragged breath hitched in his throat. His eyes slowly opened. The feral glow of the alpha was extinguished. "Quinn!" His voice was a wet, broken rasp. "Shut up," she ordered. Her voice trembled violently. "Keep your eyes open. Do not close your eyes." He ignored the command. He weakly raised a trembling hand. He wasn't trying to touch her. He was pressing the silver master key drive back into her palm. He had never let it go. "Leave me," Roman coughed. A thin line of blood spilled over his split lip. "They will track my blood, my scent. If you stay, you die." "I am not leaving you," she yelled, the raw desperation tearing her throat. "I traded your heart," he whispered. The absolute finality in his tone made her stomach plummet. He was giving up his life to balance the ledger. "Take the drive. Buy her back. Buy your freedom." His hand slipped from hers. It fell lifeless against the concrete. His golden eyes slid shut. The silence that followed was an endless, suffocating vacuum. The man who had owned the city was bleeding out on a basement floor. And the only thing standing between her and a cartel army was a rusted door. Above them, the foundation shook. A concussive boom sent concrete dust raining down from the ceiling. The Vargas cartel wasn't searching the tunnels anymore. They were actively blowing up the access points to entomb them underground. Quinn looked down at the silver drive in her hand. The ultimate leverage. Millions of untraceable dollars. She could slip through the service vents and vanish, just like she had run from the penthouse. Her deep survival instinct screamed at her to flee into the shadows. But staring at Roman's motionless body anchored her to the floor. Running meant she was just another piece of collateral. Using his money to hide meant playing by the exact same rules that men like Vargas used to control the world. She refused to just survive. Quinn shoved the drive deep into her pocket. She wiped the sweat from her face, inadvertently smearing his blood across her cheek like war paint. She turned toward the discarded weapons Roman had stripped from the dead enforcers. She picked up a black assault rifle. The cold steel felt foreign, but its weight was grounding. It was real. She slammed a fresh magazine into the well. The sharp metallic click cut through the rumbling explosions above. She walked back to the blast door. She didn't look for an escape route. She dragged an iron workbench across the floor, wedging it firmly against the handle to barricade them inside. Her wolf stopped whimpering. She raised the barrel toward the barricaded entrance. She was going to hold the line, or she was going to die trying. The steel blast door buckled. A sledgehammer slammed against the exterior metal. It rang through the boiler room like a cracked church bell. Gray powder rained from the ceiling, coating Quinn's shoulders. Vargas enforcers were trying to break the barricade. She kept her assault rifle aimed directly at the hinges. Her finger rested lightly against the trigger. But a rifle wasn't enough to kill a cartel. She lowered the barrel a fraction. She reached into her pocket. She pulled out Roman's tablet and the silver master key drive, and shoved the metal into the port. The shattered screen flickered. A ghost operating system flared to life, casting a harsh blue glow across her blood-stained face. Roman's offshore emergency funds loaded. Billions of untraceable dollars. The kind of money that bought countries. Another violent crash shook the door. The iron workbench groaned. Quinn's fingers flew across the glass. She bypassed standard comms and dialed a direct encrypted frequency to the Crimson Claw. The line clicked open. "Who is this?" Victor Petrov's cold voice echoed from the speakers. "I have Roman's master drive," Quinn stated. Her voice didn't waver. She wasn't asking for a favor. She was dictating reality. I am transferring $3 billion into your accounts right now. Silence hung on the line. Even a syndicate boss couldn't process that number instantly. And what exactly are you buying, Ghost? Victor asked. His tone shifted to raw greed. An army. Quinn hit the transfer button. Vargas has us trapped in the corporate sub-basements. Send every enforcer you have. Wipe the cartel off the map tonight. And you keep the rest of the fortune. Consider it done. The line went dead. She dropped the tablet onto the floor. She had just weaponized Roman's wealth to buy the city's most lethal predators. The booming against the door abruptly stopped. Muffled shouts echoed from the corridor outside, quickly eclipsed by the chaotic burst of heavy machine gun fire. Bullets weren't hitting the blast door anymore. The Petrov syndicate had arrived, and they were slaughtering the Vargas men in the tunnels. A dry, rattling cough broke the tension inside the room. Quinn spun around. Roman pushed himself up on his elbows. His chest heaved. The makeshift bandages were soaked through. He blinked against the dim amber light. His gaze slowly focused on her. He took in the rifle in her hands. The glowing tablet discarded on the floor, displaying an empty bank account. His own blood smeared across her cheek. He realized she hadn't taken the money. She hadn't run. What did you do? Roman rasped. Disbelief thickened his voice. I bought a new pack, Quinn answered softly. She stepped away from the barricade to kneel beside him. Roman stared. He looked up at her from the dirty floor. His expression shifted into pure awe. He didn't see a latent omega, or a piece of leverage. He saw an apex predator who had just orchestrated the downfall of an empire. Slowly, he reached up. His trembling fingers hovered inches from her face, stopping before making contact. He still refused to touch her without permission. Quinn leaned forward and pressed her cheek directly against his rough palm. A ragged breath escaped his lips. He closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against her shoulder in total surrender. The lethal shield had finally broken. We aren't hiding anymore, Quinn whispered. We are taking the penthouse back. Bright orange sparks rained onto the concrete. A plasma torch sliced through the jammed hinges. The steel slab crashed inward. Viktor Petrov's elite enforcers stepped into the boiler room. Their weapons lowered. A field medic rushed past them. He jammed an epinephrine auto-injector directly into Roman's thigh and rapidly wrapped his chest with military-grade gauze. The synthetic adrenaline hit Roman's system. It forced his eyes wide open. Shifter healing couldn't cure the blood loss, but the chemical spike gave him just enough strength to stand. Quinn slung her rifle over her shoulder. She wrapped her arm firmly around Roman's waist, supporting his weight. They walked out of the basement together. The subway tunnels were eerily quiet now, lined with the wreckage of the Vargas cartel. They ascended the maintenance stairs and burst through the ground floor exit into the freezing city rain. A fleet of armored black SUVs idled in the dark alleyway. Petrov soldiers stood by the open doors, offering quick, respectful nods. They weren't looking at Roman for orders. They were looking at Quinn. She helped Roman into the back of the lead SUV and climbed in right beside him. The convoy tore through the wet streets, an unstoppable force of metal and muscle heading straight for the Vargas stronghold. Tires hissed against the slick asphalt. Neon lights flashed across the tinted windows. Inside the cab, the tension was suffocating. Roman sat rigid, his jaw clenched tight against the pane, his hand resting inches from hers on the leather seat. The vehicles slammed to a violent halt. They had reached the towering glass apex of the Vargas high-rise, the heart of the enemy. Quinn grabbed her rifle and kicked her door open. The final confrontation was here. The elevator doors chimed. They slid open to reveal the apex of the Vargas empire. Quinn stepped onto the plush carpet of the high-rise office. It was a mirror image of Roman's penthouse. Only the air here smelled of stale rot and cheap cologne. Thunder rattled the floor-to-ceiling windows. The one-eyed Vargas boss stood behind a sleek glass desk. He didn't look afraid of the gunfire echoing from the lower floors. He looked smug. He held a piece of thick parchment in his scarred hand. The blood debt contract, the paper Roman had signed. Vargas believed that single signature meant he still owned the board. "You brought my property right to my front door," the cartel boss sneered. His single eye swept over Roman's bleeding, exhausted frame, before locking onto Quinn. "The old laws are absolute. The blood debt is signed. Submit, Omega. The Chimera lab is waiting for you." Quinn didn't flinch. She didn't drop her gaze. Instead, she pulled the tablet from her jacket pocket. "The old laws," Quinn said. Her voice carried a cold, lethal echo across the vast room. "Were written by men who needed paper to feel powerful." She tapped the glass screen. She didn't need to hack his systems. The Petrov syndicate had already secured the Vargas servers during the raid. She simply accessed his offshore accounts. She looked directly into his single, arrogant eye. "Contract cancelled," she whispered. She hit the execute key. A soft chime echoed from the desktop computer behind him. Vargas turned, his smug expression dissolving into pure panic. The screen flashed red. Every dollar, every hidden account, every asset the Vargas cartel possessed was instantly transferred to the neutral syndicates. Quinn had just bankrupted the most terrifying pack in the underground. With a single keystroke, leverage was the only language this monster understood. She had just cut out his tongue. The air thickened. The Vargas boss let out a feral roar. His bones cracked as he violently shifted mid-leap. He lunged directly across the glass desk toward her throat. A dark shadow intercepted the attack. Roman hit the Vargas Alpha. They crashed into the floor-to-ceiling window. The reinforced glass spiderwebbed under the brutal impact of their combined weight. Quinn raised her assault rifle, but she couldn't get a clear shot in the chaos. Snarls and the sickening crunch of bone filled the office. Vargas was larger, uninjured, fighting with the desperate rage of a ruined man. Roman was bleeding, running on nothing but synthetic adrenaline and pure devotion. Yet, Roman didn't fight like an arrogant king trying to assert dominance. He fought like a shield. Every time Vargas tried to break past him to reach Quinn, Roman threw his broken body in the way. He took the hits. He absorbed the agonizing claws tearing into his ruined suit. He was executing her strategy, keeping the monster contained exactly where she needed him. The violent struggle tore the office apart. A heavy mahogany bookshelf crashed to the floor. Roman caught Vargas by the throat. With a guttural roar, Roman drove the cartel boss backward. He slammed him brutally onto the shattered remains of the desk. The fight ended abruptly. Roman pinned the Alpha down. His hands locked around the man's windpipe. Roman's chest heaved. Blood dripped from his split lip onto the ruined glass. But he didn't deliver the killing blow. He didn't claim the victory for his own ego. Instead, Roman turned his head. His exhausted golden eyes found Quinn in the shadows. He held the monster down and waited for her command. His supreme power belonged to her. The silence that followed was absolute. Quinn walked slowly across the shattered glass littering the carpet. She slung the heavy rifle over her shoulder, the cold steel pressing against her spine. She stopped beside the ruined desk. The Vargas boss choked under Roman's grip, his eye wide with terror as he stared up at the Omega he had tried to buy. Quinn didn't look at him. She looked at the blood debt contract resting on the floor. She bent down and picked up the thick parchment. The ink of Roman's signature stared back at her, the exact moment her innocence had died. Next to the desk, a gold cigar lighter lay abandoned. She picked it up. She flicked the lid open. A small, bright flame sparked to life in the dark room. She held the edge of the contract to the fire. The parchment caught instantly. Orange flames licked up the paper, turning the ancient laws of the underground into floating ash. She watched it burn until the heat licked her fingertips, then dropped the flaming remains directly onto the Vargas boss's chest. The blood debt is abolished, Quinn stated. The remaining Vargas enforcers froze. They had rushed into the room during the fight. They looked at the burning ashes. They looked at their defeated alpha. Then, they looked at the woman who had orchestrated it all. One by one, the enforcers slowly lowered their weapons to the floor. They bowed their heads, exposing their throats in absolute submission. They weren't submitting to Roman. They were submitting to her. Quinn looked down at Roman. He let go of the Vargas boss's throat, his body sagging with exhaustion. The core question was finally answered. He had bled enough to buy back her heart, and she had used his sacrifice to burn the old world to the ground.